Today I am doing a review of Michel Houellebecq's latest novel, Submission. Um, I thought it was a fascinating read. I burnt through it in just under 2 days, so that's pretty quick for a novel of, I believe, something around 250 pages. Yeah, it's roughly 250 pages. Um, It was written in 2015, and the edition I have here is Penguin Random House Vintage. As you can see here, £8.99 in the UK. Probably somewhat cheaper in America. It was translated out of French by a editor in the USA called Laurie Steinem, I believe. And yeah, I can wholeheartedly recommend it. It is a fantastic read, very entertaining. There are some references to French literature and French culture in it that most people probably won't get, that don't have a background in these sort of French literature. But it's easy to research and yeah, just go look up the names that pop up in the novel, and everyone's got a phone these days. You can have a Wikipedia page on the side to kind of get some background as you read it. So what happens in the book? It's set in France in the year 2022. So it's basically set around the next general election in France. So we just had a general election in France in 2017, in which Macron won, and Marine Le Pen, basically lost, although she gained a lot of percentage. And the author wrote this book in 2015 and predicted this outcome correctly, so 2 years in advance. He obviously doesn't name Macron, like he doesn't have the name of the prime minister because Macron wasn't a thing yet in 2015. But he, predicts almost accurately the percentage Marine Le Pen gets, and predicts that she's the main contender for 2022 in France. The elections are every 5 years. So the novel's set in Paris, as you can see here. Dark clouds over the Eiffel Tower. Quite an apt cover. And the narrator is a university professor in Paris, at one of the well-known universities there, and the Michel Houellebecq really portrays the character as a typical decadent, like depressed Westerner. So, for example, he sort of gets involved with random students every year, and then he breaks up with them or is dumped by them after every semester. He's in his 40s. He doesn't have a wife. He lives alone. He eats, and this is for French, probably something that maybe Americans don't even wouldn't even become aware of in the novel. But for French, this is something that's sort of a sign of decadence, is that the narrator constantly eats microwave dinners, frozen dinners. So, France with its food culture, I think, has more of a sensitivity about how decadent microwave dinners are. And I'm not sure that this would even seem so strange to people in many other places in the West, which, is kind of sad. Um, yeah, and he basically he feels like he has no purpose left in life, and he um, is sort of placed as what I would call an observer to these French elections in 2022 and the outcome of these French elections. And these are spoilers, obviously. So spoiler alert is that the newly formed Muslim Brotherhood Party gets 35%, I believe, or so of the vote, or maybe it's 27. But then they actually form a coalition with the socialists, And Marine Le Pen and the National Front is defeated again in 2022. And there's sort of an ever increasing insurgency, and attacks on voting booths, and terrorism and gun battles literally in the center of Paris. And eventually the Muslims kind of start implementing all sorts of so they they behave very smartly in their political negotiations with the coalition, and they say that they really don't want any influence on any of the policies except for education. So as our narrator is a university professor, he sort of gets fired by the university because he's not Muslim. And Islam sort of takes over a large number of very well-known universities, help with Saudi funding. And these become Islamic universities. So, the Sorbonne and um, the narrator sort of struggles with the idea of maybe finding Christianity for a while. But I think Michel Houellebecq portrays Christianity as quite weakened and quite unattractive to sort of a secular, modern Frenchman. So in the end, what actually happens is that the narrator adopts Islam, and through adopting Islam, receives a position at the university again. And actually, I believe is promised several wives as well. So many of the university lecturers, all the French university lecturers that have converted to Islam, then kind of bribed essentially by getting 3 or 4 wives each, and getting a quadruple income. And so there's this whole idea in the novel that basically Saudi Arabia, once they see a European state which has a Muslim government or Muslim coalition government, they go all out in trying to, make it a success and fund these universities, and all these policies are implemented to kind of get the French intelligentsia on side. And it kind of ends there. So it's as the Guardian, which is probably not quite aware of some of the attitudes of the author. It says it's darkly funny, and the Spectator says it's electrifying. So what I'd like to do is that actually, just to give you a sense of the writing and some of the themes in the book, I'd like to read a passage to you guys, and then you can make up your own mind whether you think it's something you should pick up. But I think it's well worth picking up. It's not too expensive, and gives you an interesting angle on where the West is heading. So here's, I believe this is somewhere in the beginning. This is on page 55, where the narrator meets with a new sort of right-wing nativist lecturer at the university, and they have a bit of a discussion about where politics are heading in France. So I'm just going to start in the middle here of the chapter. This is really the nativist sort of, this is basically this young lecturer having a conversation with the narrator, the main character. You see, he continued, the so-called nativist bloc was actually anything but. It was divided into various factions, none of which got along with the others. You had Catholics, followers of Bruno Maigret, royalists, neo-pagans, hardcore secularists from the far left. But all that changed when the indigenous Europeans came along. They started out as a direct response to the Indigènes de la République, and sorry for massacring the French pronunciation here. They had a clear unifying message. We are the indigenous people of Europe, the first occupants of the land. They said, we're against Muslim occupation, and we're also against American companies, and against the new capitalists from India, China, etc., buying up our heritage. They were clever. They quoted Geronimo, Cochise, and Sitting Bull. Above all, their website was a state of the art. It was really well designed with catchy music. It brought in new members, younger members. You think they actually want to start a civil war? Think? I know. Here, I'll show you something they put online. He got up and went into the other room. Ever since we'd sat down in his apartment, there had been no more sounds of shooting, or else we were out of earshot, in the deep calm of the dead-end street. He came back and handed me a dozen sheets of paper, stapled together, and covered in small print. Sure enough, the headline read, "Get ready for civil war." The web is full of this kind of thing, but here's one of the better overviews, with the most reliable statistics. There are lots of members because the article looks at all 22 EU member states, but the conclusion is the same in every case. Basically, they argue that belief in a transcendent being conveys a genetic advantage, that couples who follow one of the three religions of the book and maintain patriarchal values have more children than atheists or agnostics. You see less education amongst women, less hedonism and individualism, and to a large degree this belief in transcendence can be passed on genetically. Conversions, or cases where people grow up to reject family values, are statistically insignificant. In the vast majority of cases, people stick with whatever metaphysical system they grow up in. That's why atheist humanism, the basis of any pluralist society, is doomed. Monotheism is on the rise, especially in the Muslim population. And that's even before you factor in immigration. European nativists start by admitting that. Sooner or later, we'll see a civil war between the Muslims and everybody else. They conclude that if they want to have a fighting chance, that war had better come as soon as possible, certainly before 2050, preferably sooner if possible. I see what you mean. Yes, from a political and military standpoint, they're obviously right. The question is whether they've decided to go from talk to action, and if so, in which countries. Every country in Europe is more or less equally hostile to Muslims, but France is a special case because of its military. The French armed forces are still among the strongest in the world, and their strength has been maintained in the face of budget cuts by one government after another. That means no uprising can take hold if the government sends in the troops, which is why there has to be a special strategy for France. Meaning, soldiers have short careers. Right now we have 330,000 troops in French armed forces, land, sea and air, if you include the gendarmerie. Annual recruitment is roughly 20,000. So within 15 years or so, we'll see a complete turnover in military personnel. If young extremists, and they're almost all young, enlist en masse, it won't be long before they seize ideological control. That has always been the strategy of the political wing. Yeah, so that's just 1.5 pages out of the book. So you can see with what kind of topics the book deals with, and I think it's a very good read, not only because of the political angle and topics that it covers, but also there's just all these gems of life as a sort of Western man today. And there's these episodes where he hires some prostitutes, and then there's episodes where he gets on YouPorn, and then where he feels absolutely despondent because he's alone and not married, and where he sort of and the way that people sort of talk to him at the university, they're afraid of saying anything political. It's just full of these little gems, and yeah, I think you should go out and have a read and let me know what you think. Thanks, guys.